What is the scariest ghost story you ever heard? A man goes to a bed and breakfast. While checking in, the owner tells him that the room next to his is undergoing some repairs, so don't open the door or anything. The man goes to his room, drops off his things, but then is bored. He pokes around the house a little, and with nothing else to do, decides to see the room that needs repairing. He tries the door and it's locked. He wonders why the owner would even bother warning him about this room, since it's locked anyway. Whatever. He peeks through the keyhole, and the room beyond isn't actually being repaired. It's completely empty, except for a figure in the far side, if the room sitting in a chair facing the wall. The man stands up again, creeped out. Just to make sure he wasn't imagining things, he bends down and looks through the keyhole again. This time he doesn't see the figure or the room at all, just the color red, like someone was blocking the keyhole with construction paper. Weirded out, the man goes to bed. When he's at breakfast with the owner the next morning, the man asks him casually about the repairs in the next room. The owner sighs and says, "Truthfully, I don't rent out that room, because so many people have told me it's haunted by a ghost with red eyes." My friend told me a story his dad told him. Every day he would come home from school and he would be the first one there for at least an hour or two. One day he walked in the front door and the TV was on, and instantly turned off. He stood in the doorway for a second, turned around and walked away. He didn't go back into the house until his parents came home. It gives me the heebas thinking about it. The portraits always creeps me out. There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long day hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around, he was surprised to see the walls adorned by many portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep point face down in an unfamiliar bed. He turned blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows. This story takes place in 1975. My grandpa was a farmer. He was living in a village, and he had apricot trees in a field a long way out of the village. It was a small village. Paulette, imagine how it was in the fields. You know those villages with 100 permanent citizens. Well, the best time for watering in the summer is the night, so he went to water the trees. When he took the backhoe, remember it was a pitch black with no moon countryside. He saw behind him two shining eyes. What he thought it was a ghost. Point terrified, he yelled and run and even throw rocks at it, but nothing happened. It kept following him. When it reached my grandpa, it turned out to be a stray little donkey. P.S. I know it is not the kind of the typical scary story, but imagine being alone in a pitch black field. I wouldn't say it was a ghost story, but it did happen to me. A few years back I was camping in Lake Havasu with my brother and a few friends. My brother and I were working on building a fire, while the other guys were on the boat mooring it to the shore. We had a hole we dug where we had our previous fires that trip, so my brother and got the fire going and sat down around the pit. The fire was burning for a good 10 minutes and was at a decent size before the most bizarre thing happened. The fire just went out, completely extinguished, as in no more flame. The embers were still there emitting heat, but the flame was gone. My brother and I looked at each other, then back at the fire pit. A few seconds go by, then the fire reignites to level it was at before it went out. We are totally confused, and we just start screaming for the guys to come check out what happened. TLDR, fire gods got bored and decided to play a joke. I don't remember all of the details, because my dad told me this story several years ago, but here it goes. When my dad was younger and still living in Poland, he and a few friends took a trip, and one night decided to stay at a bed and breakfast type place. Everything seemed normal until he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. He told me he felt some sort of presence behind him, so he slowly turned around but there was no one there. He swears he could feel someone there on the bed with him though, along with a slight shift in pressure on the bed. It went away after a few minutes and my dad went back to sleep. The next morning he found out that a man had died in that bed about a week or so prior. I heard this when I was in Korea. One day a girl was walking home late night after work or something. It was dark and around midnight. She lived in an apartment where they had elevator. She got in the elevator, and when the door was about to close, a strange man with very red hoodie entered the elevator. He apologized for scaring her and asked which floor she is heading to, without making an eye contact. She told him out of fear and the man casually pressed the button on the one below. As they were on the way, he asked her for her cell phone, if he could use it, but she declined out of suspicious, and isolated herself in the corner. After seconds of silence, elevator arrived to the floor below the one girl was heading to and the door opened. The guy slowly walked out of the door, and turned around facing toward the elevator and the girl, and just stared at her without any movement. Slowly the door started to close, and from the gap, she could see him turning around heading for upstairs, pulling a knife out of his pocket. Personal story here, I posted this before, but I'll try again. When I was in high school, my family had to move from Central Texas back to West Texas for my dad's job. We were under a lot of stress and other family issues at the time as well, but that is besides the point. My sister and my mom were painting the upstairs walls as we got the house to get ready. My mom was on the wall to the far right, there was a blank wall in the middle, and my sister was on the far left. I was downstairs packing up things into boxes. Anyway, suddenly, my sister comes downstairs. She is older than me, looking scared out of her mind. She asks me to come upstairs. On the wall in between them, for no apparent reason, this writing appeared. Looking closely enough, you can see it was not written by accident, but rather by broad strokes made by a human hand. Problem is, the handprint is too big for any of us three to make it. The longer we stayed in the room, the more freaked out we got as we realized that nobody was playing a prank on anyone else. I still have no explanation to this day of what it means. TL. Dr. Ghost writing appears on wall in paint. Here is the photo. This one is a bit long, but gives me the shivers. One beautiful day, two couples were on a hike to a cottage they rented out. Through hours of hiking, they finally reached their destination. Once the two couples got settled in, one couple and the boyfriend, let's call him George, the other couple decided to continue venturing on, see what was around. The girlfriend of George, let's call her Sarah, felt too tired to continue hiking, so decided to stay behind. Time goes by, night falls, and a heavy storm ensues. Worried, Sarah tries calling the rest of the group, but nobody picks up. Moments pass by and Sarah hears a knock on the door. It's the group. They're finally back, but without George. They simply reply, "We are so sorry, we called to save him." They look all beaten up, scratched, like they got into an accident, and it's as if they looked like they saw a ghost. Blank stares of terror as Sarah stares at the couple is disbelief. She shuts the door and cries in the front room. The other couple decide to head to bed. As Sarah continued to cry, she saw a figure in the distance, waving. She couldn't quite make out what it was, until there he was, standing in the middle of the field. Being flushed with mixed emotions, Sarah bolts out the door to see if it was really him. As she gets up to him, George grabs her by the hand and sprints faster than he ever did. As they're running, he says out of breath, "They all died." True story. My best friend died of cancer back in 2002. We were incredibly close in every way, and we spent the majority of our free time together almost a year. After she died, I was in my apartment sleeping, and my phone rang around 3 a.m. I had one of those Sony Ericsson T610. I was very groggy, and picked up the phone from my nightstand, and looked at it. I saw it was my friend's number. I immediately became alert and awake, and answered the phone very curious. I said hello a few times, but all I could hear was very loud static for about 30 seconds. Eventually the call ended. At this point I was freaking out, and called the number back, only to get an automated recording that this number was out of service. I then called her mother's house to see if possibly her older sister may have had my friend's old phone and might have called me by accident, but there was no answer at my friend's mother's home. Come to find out, the remaining family was away in Miami. After they came home a few days later, I took the phone to them and showed them the call log, and they were in disbelief. They went to my friend's room and got the phone out of the drawer where it had been sitting for months, battery stone cold dead. I used to watch Ghost Whisperer with Jennifer Love Hewitt because I thought it was scary as fuck. But after watching a few episodes, I realized every time that the ghost is only initially evil because something bad happened, or it was pretending to be evil to save someone. In the end, I'm left crying because chick flicks play with my manly heart like a kitten with yarn. Then when I realize what a softie I am, then I really get scared. So yes, Ghost Whisperer hands down.